Now, it's traditional in New Zealand to start in the language of our first people in Māori, so I will do that. Tihei Māori ora, e ngā mana, e ngā reo, e ngā mata waka o te motu. Nau mai, piki mai, haere mai. Haere mai I rangi te kaupapa whakaherehia o tēnei wā, o te wānanga o Zenergy. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. And as we have both Australia and New Zealand, I will also introduce with an acknowledgement of country. I begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which this webinar is being co-hosted and the many lands on which we are all meeting together today. I pay my respects to the elders, past and present, and I'm joining from Aotearoa, New Zealand, and wish to pay my respects to iwi's tangata whenua and treaty partners. Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon. And anyone that's joining from further afield, good morning and good day. Wherever you come from, welcome, welcome, welcome. My name's Stephen Thorpe, and with my colleague Simone Mouse, we'll be leading you through the session today. We have the Zenergy concepts to introduce to you and a diagnostic framework. We hope you'll enjoy our invitation to explore and some of that advanced facilitation practice that we talk about will be shared from the people that are joining us today. Because I know we have a lot of experience and people that have had a lot of time working and leading groups. So our purpose today is to share advanced facilitation wisdom. And in terms of our culture, our ways that we'll work together today, we encourage you to value difference, to participate, to be curious, and to give it a go. And I'll paste our purpose and culture in the chat. Now, before I say a little bit about me, I'll invite my co-host Simone to introduce herself.
Thank you, Stephen. So I also like to acknowledge the custodians of the land that I'm speaking from, the land of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation here in Melbourne. And I like to pay my respects to the elders, past, present, and emerging. And like to say my thanks to all the work and caring they have done off country and the spirit of this land that I can enjoy and be part of now. So my home country is Germany originally. I'm a Saxon woman from the state of Saxony in Germany, and this is where I grew up and where I studied and where I found facilitation about 35 years ago. And I was part of a big transformation in my country when I went to university there, which was the big task of bringing two countries together, namely East Germany and West Germany, after the Berlin Wall came down. And this is where I discovered facilitation and the magic of facilitation and how facilitation can really help groups from really diverse backgrounds and diverse cultures come together and find a way forward around a common purpose. Fast forward, I landed in New Zealand about 15 years ago, where I found Zenergy and a real resonance with the work that I'd done at university back home and my work during the time after that. And it just gave a whole nother language. And for me, I discovered for the first time that facilitation is actually a profession when I found Zenergy. In Germany, it was still called moderation or meeting guidance or other things. But actually the term of a facilitator and that it's actually a profession you can learn was something that I found in New Zealand and finding the Australasian Facilitator Network. And then I moved to Australia and bought Zenergy here. So here I am. I now founded also my own company called Collective Insight, and I'm bringing these tools into healthy relationship coaching at work and at home, which is really my sort of current exciting project. And I also work in corporates and do large culture transformation and team development using the Zenergy tools and corporacy values. And I've been training these energy materials for 13 years now, I think, as well, since very shortly after I arrived in Auckland. in New Zealand. Thanks, Stephen.
Okay, thanks, Simone. A little bit about me. I'm a director of Synergy, and I lecture in the computer sciences at the Auckland University of Technology. So it's great to have a couple of our neighbours here from the University of Auckland across the road. Um, I teach a team facilitation class in the Master of IT Project Management, and I work with organisations predominantly in the technology space, where it's really important for people to work together in technology projects in order for them to be successful. And I supervise students that are doing all sorts of interesting research projects in that technology space, working with culture and people and making projects a little bit more successful. So today we're going to do a little brief introduction to Xenergy and Dale Hunter. We're going to introduce you to the 6 steps, which we're going to use around distinctions, and then the mandala of essence for facilitation that we're hoping next that you'll have a go applying that to a situation that is relevant to you or an experience you've had where this might have been useful, or just to explore the model and see how it resonates with what you already know about facilitation and group work. And then we're going to do some reflections and gather the wisdom in the room. So that's our plan for today. Now, my own facilitation foundation story began some 26 years ago when I had this wonderful lady named Dale Hunter. And there's a photo of her on the screen there. She walked into my research laboratory at the university, and we had a wonderful conversation about the consciousness of trees. And I shortly after came to Xenergy for a 6-month work placement secondment, and 25 and a half years later, I'm still there. So that was a wonderful opportunity to learn about the work that Dale Hunter was doing and the work of the IAF and getting involved in the AFN as well. So Dale started Xenergy back in 1993 with 3 other colleagues, and they focused on training people and training in group work. And since then, she's also written 5 books with others, including The Art of Facilitation, which is a very popular book and my go-to for things on facilitation. She's also contributed many book chapters, and she developed the Xenergy Diploma of Facilitation, drawing on the work of John Heron and Carl Rogers and Peter Singh and others. Dale completed a PhD on sustainable cooperative processes in organizations, and much of our Xenergy approach is built on that research work and the work that she did grounding in community development in lots of places in South Auckland. So Xenergy, in one sense, is a cooperative of group facilitators committed to whole people cooperating in the same sustainable world. So that's a little bit of a taste of Xenergy and us. And now hand you over to Simone to walk through maybe one of the tools that we're going to be exploring this evening. Over to you, Simone.
Thank you so much. Yeah, so of course we're here for a purpose today, and we want to look at some tools that might help us to facilitate some of those really difficult situations. You know, what's gonna happen when a group gets stuck? So one of the tools that we're using in our synergy training is called the six steps framework. So if you get stuck in a certain situation, we have a number of distinctions that we work with, which we will introduce in a minute to you. But in order to really understand and experience these distinctions, we're using a 6-step framework to really embody the understanding of those. So today you only will probably have a little bit of an understanding of those distinctions, which we also use for the diagnostic tool. And you maybe have some experience of those distinctions from your own experience, and you maybe have integrated some of that already. But what you can maybe move forward to after this webinar is to look in your groups when you're working to start recognizing when some of those distinctions are missing. And hopefully today we can talk about how can you as a facilitator demonstrate or what interventions can you do in order to bring those distinctions alive so that they are generated in a group. So this is how we work with the 6-stage framework. The first three steps we often use in our stage one program, where you are learning to understand all of those distinctions, or we can call them criteria as well, to understand them, to experience them, and really integrate them in your body. So you don't have them just conceptually, if you actually realize what safety and trust feels like. You realize when powerful listening is missing in a group. And in our stage two program that's going to happen in June, you really learn about in the moment to recognize what is actually missing in the group that keeps that group stuck. And what intervention can I do in order to move that group forward? That's what you would learn. So let's put a little bit of a lens on that now in this program. So here is a list of the distinctions that I'm talking about. And some of them are most likely are very familiar to you. So this is really an attempt to look, it's a bit like using a torch as a facilitator, really trying to use your attention to single out aspects of good group cohesion and group cooperation. Yeah. And these distinctions have been, researched by Dale through her work, find that these distinctions are needed in a group to have sustainably high performance and sustainably working together well. And so they're really powerful to use them when a group gets stuck or when you have a difficult situation. There's normally one of those are missing, and you can use them as a diagnostic tool. So let's talk about them a little bit. So purpose and culture, most of you, I would imagine, are using purpose and culture as a grounding thing. Yeah. So, we at the beginning, and Stephen posted that into the chat, we have a really clear purpose on our webinar, and we also have set a culture. This is only a very short event, but we gave you how we work together and what we want to achieve. Yeah, very quickly. When you're working with a group longer, you most likely want to involve the group, what their purpose is and what they want to achieve, and you want to know how they want to work together. So if you have a workshop for a whole day, you most likely will ask the group, so what are some of the behaviors we need here to have? So purpose and culture are the anchor that give you the container and the mandate as a facilitator in which you facilitate any kind of group interaction. And it might sound simple, but I find it in all my work I've done, I find it really hard to help my clients to really find the purpose of their sessions, to really come to a very clear intention. What is really you want to get out of this event? They come up with a whole list of goals, but what's the overall collective intention that you want to get? Is it connection, or is it a planning project, or what is the purpose? So I find it really hard, and I would love to hear what other people think as well, how they find it. I see some nodding from Helen there, but this is the key thing to get everyone aligned around. Stephen, you want to talk about the next one?
Yeah, with safety, we might be referring to physical safety, emotional safety, mental safety, and even spiritual safety in the group space that we might be working with a group. And often when I think, well, does this group have practices within it that minimize risk for people? Are they caring for each other? Are they respectful? And you can often notice that there's something there that people are taking care of each other. They're looking to safety. Sometimes that safety might be around confidentiality. So you need to have something in place, perhaps as part of the culture, that allow that safety to emerge. Particularly if you're getting sensitive topics you're talking about that might have replications outside of the room. So there's different layers to safety, and safety means different things to different people. That's always tricky as a facilitator because you wanting to create an environment that's safe for people to share, and people have different ideas of what that needs to be. So having a conversation about safety can often be a really useful thing before you meet, or perhaps early on with a group that's working over time. In terms of trust, we know in the research that trust is really vital for groups to work together and to succeed. But it's also important to think of the group trusting the facilitator. And often you're looking for participants being respectful. Are they being honest? Are they willing to share information? Willing to maintain confidentiality if that's required, and to give honest feedback to one another. So those are some of the levers we might be looking at around that safety and trust. Yeah, Simone.
Yeah, being with and intimacy, this is really the ability of how present is the group with each other. How skilled are they to be silent with each other? Is silence even a thing? You know, can they actually be in each other's presence and in each other's emotions? And that's also the question, can you do that as a facilitator? What is your level of presence? What is your level of being with the group and holding aside? So being with is a typical Zenergy term, which refers to being with another. So you are present with yourself, but you're also present with another person, and you're present with the whole group, which refers to the phenomena of holding a group in facilitation. Yeah, and being with means your attention is with them, with you, with the others. So it's a silent and a silent skill. Yeah. So can you be present with everything that's going on in yourself, with the agenda and how, what's going on in a group when it's challenging? And can you be with the emotions that are going on in the group as well? And just be with, can you silence yourself? Can you self-facilitate yourself to a space of presence where you can actually listen to your intuition? Without being with, you don't have any intuition. You can't access your intuition to feel what might be um, the next intervention to do. And being with really enables for people to shift as well in the room, particularly when you've got some emotions coming up and you have a good level of being with, which is just basically neutral attention. That's all what it is. It's neutral attention. Someone can actually shift in their emotions if you're not getting engaged, if you're not trying to fix it, and you just be with. And it creates ultimately, when you're long enough in a group, and for those who have done Zenergy with us in a group setting, when that is present and people are practicing that, a certain level of group intimacy starts to happen, and people feel really connected, and they feel like, oh my God, in such a short time, how can you create so much connection? That's often the feedback we get in our courses because of the level of being with. Stephen?
Yeah. Next up, we have powerful listening and speaking. And I always like that we talk about listening first because we have this wonderful mining the gold process we like to use, which is encouraging people to practice listening for an intention and listening for what's happening, perhaps with someone between the words that they might see. And listening that way, you do have to be present and try to listen without filtering someone else's speaking through our own opinions, our own beliefs, our own views, our own emotions, and maybe even our own cultural upbringing. It's like listening without judgment and being present and open with that person. And often, if you're able to listen, that then the powerful speaking will start to emerge. And you can often tell in a group if someone is speaking from their heart or speaking from their own intuition, or maybe speaking their own truth. There's a quality to it, and there's a different quality when they're just downloading, and so they're sharing what they already know, or they're being indirect about what they're saying, and they're not necessarily being open about exactly what they're trying to say, and you can tell that difference between the that listening and speaking. And so we work on those in the group. And if you notice that people are being timid and they're not really saying what they really want to say, they're being too nice to each other, then that could be something that you could choose to focus in on as an intervention. Or you've got a group, particularly in academic environments, where people are used to being right all the time. And in fact, my colleagues are paid to be right in 1 and 2 hour sound bites with a room full of students. So it can often be very hard to work with people that they want to be right about the opinion. And some of these meetings, they're trying to be more right than the others in the room, but they're not really listening to one another. And so that could be the lever you look to. It's like, yeah. acknowledging the expertise in the room, but also are you able to listen to others and encouraging that? Okay, Simone,
Sure,
intentionality. Yeah.
intentionality. So without purpose, clarity, you don't have intentionality in the group. So you notice that on the group goes off track a lot. You know, they're talking about all sorts of things because the group is not actually aligned around the purpose and they know why they are there. So the intentionality is the energy that powers us forward. It's a very powerful energy. You know, it's like very clear, very direct. People are speaking in a very direct, linear way. Not necessarily has to be linear, but it is aligned with the purpose. That's where you feel intentionality is there. And there's a certain speed to it. People are progressing really fast around the task because people are intentional and aligned to get it done. Right? So that's you can feel it when I speak about it. It's very forward moving. When that's not there, people are completely distracted. Everything takes a long time. There's a lot of issues because the people are not actually full-heartedly behind what we are doing here. So that's intentionality, and you often, yeah, time is an issue with intentionality. You have to drag the group through because they go off
Yeah.
talking too long, etc., because they're not in tune with the time that's available.
Yeah. And certainly in projects, you might see that people are intentional about the things that maybe don't matter, but the really
Mm.
important things aren't being focused on. But yeah, could be something to use as a lever. Yeah. Our next one is power with. And Starhawk talks in her book, Truth or Dare, about three different types, which we talk about in the book, The Essence of Facilitation. There's power over, power from within, and power with. And in all groups, there's power dynamics at play. Often you might see it between hierarchical organizations where some are senior and some are junior. People will defer to people in positions of power. Sometimes you might see the young deferring to the elderly. You may see women deferring to men, and looking at the process of how that power plays out in the group can be really useful. And often, if there's power over present, there's some layer of control where that power has been exercised. Power from within can come from a sense of our own connection with ourselves, with bonding with others, and sometimes that power with the environment. They call it the wairua tapu, the connection through the land to draw your mana in New Zealand. Power with comes from that willingness to listen and to respect one another and to take action together, even though there might be those power differences in there. So it's an interesting way to look at when you're facilitating.
Yes, and as a facilitator, it's certainly a journey to learn how to share power with the group and how to not have the group defer just to you, and for the group to take co-ownership in your creation, in your purpose and your outcomes. That's often really hard. So they're walking away and owning their outcomes rather than just deferring to you. So this is a skill as a facilitator how to share power. Truthfulness and congruence speaks to the bravery of a facilitator. I feel is like a courageous compassion to stand in what the group can achieve. So being congruent with the culture that the group agreed and the purpose. So you as a facilitator guarding the purpose and the culture. And you sometimes have to speak very, clear and truthful. Well, you actually said that in the culture. Does that mean it doesn't happen anymore? Really interrupting behaviors that are not aligned with the culture in order to achieve congruency. So if that, and also encourage team members to do that, to stand for that, to guard the culture. Next one, Steve.
Yeah, ethics and integrity. I mean, ethics essentially are our moral sense of principles, their rules of conduct, and it can be different for different people. So it's a challenging area because we all have different ways of operating, different things we believe, different principles we have, and yet we come together in the group and we have to work in a common way. And when I think about ethics and integrity, I often think of Chris Argyris' work and Schoen's work on what they call espoused theory and theory in action. And it's that idea that we have ways we believe we want to work or we want to work, but then the reality of when we're in the moment and working, that theory sometimes might show up differently. And I always think of the phrase, do as I say, not as I do, as a good example of that. But we use this term integra key to talk about how those play out as a facilitator. It's this idea that you have what you think and what you say and what you do in alignment. And that's the integra key, and that will unlock the door. So sometimes it can be very hard to live a life that's always in line with our own principles when the dynamics of the situation put one principle or one rule against another and how we work. And it's the same with the group and the different participants in it, looking at those layers. And certainly, if a group's not behaving morally or legally in their ways of conduct or the way they're operating, then that's an area you might pull out. So,
Yeah, and also when you see in a group that, particularly when it is a longer group that's going on for several times, when there is integrity missing, you see that people say one thing, but they don't behave in the way they speak. So, what interventions can you do in order to bring integrity back? Because it erodes and it sabotages the group, right? Emotional competence, that speaks to the ability to manage people emotions. So in a cooperative group where we share power and where we need everyone's voice, we also need people to be emotional competent. Because if they're bringing their own emotions and their own triggers and they can't self-facilitate, then it again sabotages the group. It takes the group completely off track. So they need to be loved, they need to be understood, they need to be um, acknowledged. These are all needs we have in groups, and things come up in groups because, from our own family systems, etc. So how people manage their own emotions and not letting their ego run wild to sabotage the group is a real key thing. And so as a facilitator to notice, okay, emotional competence is missing. What can I do to intervene to generate emotional competence again, right? That's how we're looking at that. Intuition.
yeah, I like a very simple definition of intuition, and I call it knowledge that isn't rational. And often we have an instinct or a gut feeling about something. Sometimes we might even feel it in our physical bodies that, there's something not quite right here. And to listen to that and maybe choose to make an action or a decision about it is often a really good choice when you're facilitating. And sometimes, particularly with groups that are very rational, you can simply ask an intervention that says, well, what does your intuition think? And it'll take them out of that rational, logical space of the brain that they might be stuck in to just check in. Is there other ways of knowing here that we can use in the group? Because sometimes rational, logical discussion doesn't create the solution you really need. Yeah, there's a lot we could talk about intuition. Uh, yeah.
Yes, and also Synergy uses a whole person, we call the whole person facilitator, So how can you ask, like, what does your gut tell you, or what does your heart tell you to access different intelligences in our body, the collective intelligence of our body. So our training really works a lot around that
Mhm.
and how to generate that really showing up in the group. Completion. I think that's a concept that most people don't understand. Quite a hard one, and that's really practicing in our stage two. Completion is the ability to recognize when something is complete, and also to see if the group actually continues their conversation until they get to a completion of a point before they go to the next one. And as a facilitator, it's a real powerful skill to be able to listen for completion. Because as a facilitator, you can name the completion when you see it, and then you can move on to the next agenda item, or to the next point. What often can happen is that we are driven by the chronological time of the agenda and we are cutting things short and not actually letting it come to a completion. And then the conversation keeps on going outside of the room. So as a facilitator, how can you create more ability and skills to really come back to completions? There's also powerful questions around creating completion. Is there anything else we need to say to be complete around this point? It's a very powerful question. And if people say no, then you say, okay, so what do we need to do with that? Do you guys need to book another time, or do we want to continue and shift something else on the agenda? So the negotiating of time. Completion has an energy. And when you really experiment and experience completion, you feel it's like a subtle shift of energy, like out of the tension in the group when they're starting to discuss, there's a release of some sort. And when you are really a whole person facilitator, really connected with your whole person, you can read the energy in a room and you can read completion. And that's like when I do, for example, creating a team purpose. It's the first time a team comes together to have some real storming around why they're actually a team. Why do they exist as a team? Why do then I allow them to storm and to bring all their individual intentions and individual purposes? And we're coming together, and I'm waiting for that feeling of a completion. And that's when everyone feels like, ah, yes, that's what it is. And it's not a giving in, or it's a just, you know, people compromising. That's not what we're looking for. We're looking for like everyone like yes. And you can see it on the body language. You see people nodding. You see them relief. Oh, that's what it is. Right? So that's, and then I check again and say, okay, so out of 1 to 10, where do you feel now about, well, how do you feel now about this purpose? And they put like the hands up, give them like a scale of 1 to 10. So I can see where people are. And then I ask the people who are still at an 8 or 9, okay, what else do we need? So I keep on going until we have a completion, because when the team purpose is complete, the team actually can fire up as a high performing team. It's very powerful. So completion is one of my favorite distinctions.
Yes.
Yeah, and Stephen, I know you love it too. Yeah.
Well, it's been a hard one for me to learn. And the other side to it is not cutting it off too early and pushing on the timeline and the agenda, which I've been guilty of. Say, oh, we're running out of time, sorry, and then leaving the group incomplete. That's not always a good way to facilitate. Our next one is affirmation and celebration. And I often look for two things with this. Are people being appreciated for what they're contributing? And often that's evident in some teams, and then in others it's not. Particularly in my school, where I work with a lot of engineers and computing people, and the idea of affirming and appreciating people's contribution is countercultural, because the principle is that people are engineers, they get paid to do that. They shouldn't need anything else. And so we don't see a lot of affirmation and celebrations as much in our department, because it's just a culture that doesn't do that. And then when I go into another group where it's really present, it's like, wow, I really like working in this team because the things I do are acknowledged. Um, the other part is that celebration has such an affirming power. And if you're in a team that's working on things over time, and you can celebrate the small things, they build up to the big things. And even in Xenergy, I remember we would be working on something. If we got something partially done, Dale and I would put a dot next to it on our to-do list and say we've got something done towards it. And we'd often celebrate the work that we've done to achieving something. And it does have a really wonderful impact. And I also think of Gottman and Gottman's work. They looked at successful couples. And one of the things they noticed when they followed couples around for 24 hours, they looked at hundreds of them. They followed them around. What they noticed with the successful couples is that the successful couples noticed and appreciated what was being contributed by their partner 75% more than the unsuccessful couples. And so it was something that was really evident that it's something that helps keep the group together and keep people contributing. So affirmation and celebration, they're always an afterthought, but it's actually something that builds a way of working, and it has such a strong power. Okay.
Yes. Yes. And the positive affirmation around when something is done well. When we give feedback as well, we're always teaching around, what is something affirming feedback, and some do it differently, and then definitely a celebration at the end of the feedback because we all gave it a good go.
Mm,
So this was a lot, and I just want to remind ourselves this is a whole journey to really embody these distinctions. Yeah, we got a few books. There's the Art of Facilitation, which is step one, to understand more of the distinctions. Then there is the Essence of Facilitation, which we will send you a link to download, a bit more in there. And there's you learn in there some tips on how to intervene to actually generate it. So just a reminder of the path towards really embodying these distinctions is like understanding what they mean. You got a little bit from us just now, but what's your own understanding? What's your experience when you actually see them in the room? We're gonna go there in a minute. What have you integrated? What do you absolutely know in your heart that this is what powerful listening feels like, or this is what powerful speaking feels like, so you can recognize it easier? Can you recognize it when it's missing? Can you demonstrate it in a group when you notice it's missing? And are you able to generate it? Which means, is it actually showing up in the group without you not even doing much visibly? You know, this I call it a bit like the invisible magic. You actually shifting something, like for example, you're noticing being with is missing, and you can you can put yourself into more of a state of presence and being with, and it mirrors back in the group. You can instantly feel the shift. And the same is with powerful listening, the same is with completion. There's a number of things you can do in an invisible way that shifts the group. So that's the magic that you might have wondered what really good facilitators do in the background. So we created a bit of a diagnostic tool, and we want to have a bit of a play with it now, so you can have some action on this. And definitely, there will be half an hour where we get your wisdom into some of the challenges that you brought today as well. So, we want to, before you do the tool, just a little example on how we use the tool. So, Stephen, you want to start off?
yes, yeah. I had a scenario where I was visiting a friend and she'd been flatting with some people for a long time. And this was, I think, their third flat that they'd flatted together with in 4.5 years that they'd known each other. And it was like you could feel the coldness and it was so silent. You could hear a pin drop and they weren't talking to each other. And I thought, oh, what's going on? It turns out there was a flat dispute and they weren't all talking to each other. And so I offered to facilitate, a flat dispute conversation with everyone. And, I used this energy addressing conflict with rounds technique. And it was amazing that within 5 minutes, I had someone swear at somebody, someone bang the table, and someone scream and storm out and slam the door within 5 minutes of starting. And I thought, oh my goodness, I must be the worst facilitator on earth. It didn't take long for the group to erupt. And so I said, oh, perhaps we'll take a 20-minute break here and come back together. And I went and sat on the back step with my friend, and she cried for most of that 20 minutes. And then surprisingly, everybody came back after that 20 minutes. And so we continued with the process. And this time I pushed a bit more on the culture because it was really clear that they'd lost track of the purpose that they have. Because the purpose of flatting together is to have a good time and to live together, cohabit in a supportive and positive way. And they were doing the opposite of that. And I'd seen them live in a really nice way. They were really good friends and they worked with each other really well. And all of a sudden they were, and the ways they were working with each other, they'd come to this sort of stalemate where they'd decided to agree to not engage anymore. And so their culture wasn't really strong in supporting them. And, if nothing had happened, it would have probably seen some of them leave within a few weeks' time. So I noticed that, there was this purpose and culture had been lost that they'd had before. The other thing is that it clearly wasn't safe for people to speak because they'd got to the stalemate of not speaking anymore because they'd tried and obviously there was no listening. And some of the other layers, the being with an intimacy that had been there had dropped from where it was. There's certainly some emotional intelligence that some of them had, and others were just totally stuck in their emotions. And so they had a bit of a mix. Um, yeah, I think intuition was low. They often said that there's nothing that can be done about it, and they were stuck. And yeah, definitely no listening. So there was no listening present. So on the powerful listening and speaking aspect, I thought that was quite low. Some of the things, the integrity was really strong because people were very clear about how they felt, what they believed. Um, they weren't trying to manipulate or do power over each other, and I noticed that they were very truthful about what they were saying. So I think those were the things that really stood out about this particular case. And it turned out the argument was over the flat accounts. So they put money each week into the flat account to buy the food and the things for the flat. And there'd been an issue because the girls had bought their panty shields with the flat account, and the boys thought the girls had broken the rules because you're not allowed to buy personal items with a flat account. And so this was where the conflict had got to. And when they came back together, they started sharing their perspectives. They got two different perspectives on what the rules were. The girls thought the boys were just being disruptive and playing unfair, and the boys thought there was this rule breaking situation. What they solved it with in the next conversation was that the boys were allowed to buy their roll on deodorants out of the flat account, and it solved it for the whole group. And I was surprised that on the third round they'd solved their own conflict. But this is a really useful diagnostic to look at because I could see that there was no listening. So I reaffirmed that everyone's going to get a chance to speak, one person speak at a time. Don't react to what someone says. You're going to get a chance to have your conversation. Use I statements. All of these things we sort of know that help when we're in these conflicted situations. And they solved their own problem. And I was amazed at the other end that I had this extreme of people screaming and swearing and leaving the room, and then 25 minutes later, they'd come up with a solution and they were all happy and friends again. And I thought, wow, um, yeah, there's some things here that really worked. And yeah, that's my story. Um, yeah, some of the takeaways, encouraging that deep listening and trusting that there's a solution in the group. They will find it. Yeah, it's not a fix that I could have brought along and solved. Mm. Simone.
Cool. Yep. I did it as well. I did it on an example where I was invited to co-facilitate an interfaith dialogue here in Melbourne. And the purpose was really to learn to have a space of dialogue where people listen to diverse perspectives. And another purpose was to actually handle some of the more triggering subjects that are at the moment in the area. So it was basically between Jewish people and Palestinians and Muslim people. So they were really looking at quite intense words like, genocide, Zionism, and things like that. So they invited a number of facilitators to hold a space and to facilitate that dialogue. I was one of many, and we split into small groups, and the whole activity was very much focused around safety, because of course, it's a very, very triggering subject. So we were very high on safety and trust. We were very high on being with intimacy. We had regular silent moments to just let emotions simmer after someone shared. The emotional intelligence and the intuition was very, very high in the room, and the affirmation and intentionality and truthfulness and integrity and powerful listening, all of that we were really good at because we knew how most very important it was. However, we actually never got to the tricky subjects. That was one downfall. We actually never got to those tricky subjects because we spent so much time around creating safety and hearing everyone's story and why they are there, etc., that we didn't get to the tricky subjects. So what I really felt was missing was real clarity on purpose. Like I think there was lots of different people who had different kind of ideas of why they were there, which was also really difficult because it's a very dynamic group. Not the same people come to every gathering. So that was really hard to get the right purpose for everyone on being on the same page. We didn't get to a completion. There was a long time planning to have this conversation and a big desire, and we didn't reach it yet. And I also felt there was a bit of power with missing in terms of actually in the moment working with like who is in the room and why are you in the room and what's the purpose we want to achieve together. So the facilitators prepared the purpose and they prepared the process and keep it all really, really safe. But we missed out to actually bring the group in and say, like, so this is what we prepared. How does that sit with you? And what is it, that we really want to get out of those few hours together? I thought that could have been done differently. So interventions, the first one I just mentioned, and enable participation in the completion as well, like asking people where to go next with this. So again, great way to use this diagnostic tool to see like what could we have done differently and where can we go next with this group. So we love to do the same thing that you do that as well now. So you got the diagnostic tool in the chat. Um, so I like you to pick a group, right? Something you're working with. You obviously were attracted to this webinar. Maybe there's a group scenario that you're struggling with and a group gets stuck. And how do you rate the presence of each of those 12 essences or criterias in your group? Which ones were missing even entirely? So you got just 5 minutes to do a self-assessment on an example, and then I put you into groups of three, and you can share with each other what you have, like 5 minutes each. It's really only very short, and it's just for you to have a bit of time on reflecting on those distinctions that we spoke about. Any questions before you go out, before you start doing your self-assessment? Okay.
Yeah.
I guess we can turn off that
Yeah, I
full
guess
bit.
a very simple question. Uh, what, what, if anything, are the insights from having a play or having a go with this diagnostic lens? Who would like to share?
Old-fashioned hand.
Great.
It is actually really difficult to do it because I ended up having lots of sort of fives and sixes and stuff, and I'm like, but I guess what it jumped out of me is that when I think about one particular session, was that the thing that was really missing was the safety.
Yeah, yeah. And then the trick when you notice that something's missing, the challenge that we focus on stage two is like, right, you know that's missing. How are you going to generate it as the
Yeah.
facilitator? And
And
that
that's
can
what
be,
we just discussed. We were just got to
uh,
actually. Yeah.
yeah. Do you come up with some interesting ideas for how you might tackle that?
Well, we were talking about when you have one or two people who are behaving just badly and won't be facilitated.
Yeah.
And I was just asking that question, is at what point is it okay to exclude them if everybody else's safety is affected by their behavior?
Yeah. 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 It's,
We didn't come up with an answer.
there's a point somewhere, yeah, where you need to think about well, how do we generate safety? And
Mm,
sometimes it's not the facilitator's role. It's like, how can we draw on the resources of the team or the group
mm,
that's here? And sometimes just having a conversation can bring things out. I mean, intentionality is one that I work with my undergraduate project students. I say, you guys don't have the distinction of intentionality here. They're fluffing around, not doing anything, all looking to each other to take the lead. It's
mm,
like, yeah, you guys are all failing at the moment. Where's your intentionality? And then suddenly it shows up and they see the cost that, they're working on a year-long project together and they really do need to step up. So, yeah,
mm.
sometimes it's like, well, let's have a conversation of what that might look like. And that can be a really nice intervention. Yeah. Any your thoughts on safety, Simone?
No, yeah, I like the idea of having a conversation about it and actually making it conscious. It feels like there is a issue of safety in this group. Some people don't feel safe. And so how do we tackle it? Ask the group. Yeah.
I think it's really
Yeah.
easy to just end up taking too much ownership for safety, you know, almost kind of being protective, being in this sort of parent-child relationship with safety. You know, because we do take it so seriously and understand the impact on the group, but it's quite easy to get sucked into that kind of protected mama or papa bear when we see safety impacted. It's quite hooky for facilitators, I think.
Yeah, and it's quite, I just spoke today about that with a colleague. It's quite a realization like, oh, I don't have to do it all as a facilitator. We're working here with adults, you know, they're here for a purpose. So what are you up for? You know, like what's going on? Really trusting the resources in the group.
Yeah. Any other reflections on using the mandala, or was there a particular distinction that was difficult to understand or stood out really strongly in the group you're thinking about?
I had a couple of just some of my thoughts were around the link between being with and intimacy and powerful listening and powerful speaking, because what I observed in the group was there were lots of people just wanting to advocate. And so there's lots of just throwing in and lots of people wanting to debate a theoretical topic that wasn't really in service of moving the group forward. But it really got me thinking about actually how the being with is a platform for powerful speaking and powerful listening as well, because it's, it just supports it so much. And then this group, there was a lot of raising of hands. It became quite classroomy. Somebody would make a point, and then like 5 hands would shoot up, and then somebody would say their thing, and then I almost could feel I got sucked into this fairness thing of actually, oh, do I have a duty now to go around to everyone's hands? But I'm like, everything they're saying is not actually moving us forward. So, and everyone's just waiting with their hands like this. It's like, and then the hand thing got in the way really of the being with, because you get that lovely when a group is with each other, they don't need to put their hands up. There's just, they pop, right? And they feel when other people want to pop. And so, yeah, that was kind of really interesting just to have, all these hands popping up left, right, and center quite fervently. So interesting.
Interesting challenge.
Did you came up with an idea of an intervention, or what you could have done to generate that?
I mean, I wonder if there was something around noticing all the hands popping. It might be, oh, it's really interesting, what's going on for everyone right now with all these hands popping up. So I could maybe have put that curiosity to the group, but try to get them on the balcony a bit, maybe like what do we kind of, what's the intention with everything you want to say, maybe, and sort of try and get the group to notice that they might have been in quite a lot of advocacy. Or maybe they noticed other things that I didn't notice as well, which is always helpful. But yeah, I mean, to be honest, something inside me panicked. When you've got 8 professors sticking their hands up, and you can't suppress, like if you suppress an academic, it's academic freedom, right? So, it's kind of interesting doing it in that context. But I'd love to hear any other thoughts. Has anyone got any ideas? Like, what else could you do?
Yeah, I was thinking, and love to hear Stephen's thought. He's the academic expert here as well. But I was thinking, like, generating being with is inviting people to just take a breath and just have a moment of silence and reconnecting to the purpose and why we're here. Yeah, so just to let it sink. That would be one idea. Stephen?
Yeah. I mean, it sounds, if they're drifting into advocacy and the purpose isn't really clear, I'd often say, well, is this going to take the group towards the purpose, or is it taking them away? And if it's
Yeah.
taking them away, often it's okay to let them, drift a bit. If there might be
Mm.
something that's about to surface that
Mm.
comes out of that. But yeah, if you've got them all drifting into advocacy and you notice that, it's like, well, has anyone with a hand up got something that's going to take us towards our purpose? Could be an intervention. So you can be
Ah,
very direct.
nice.
Yeah.
I like that.
Because as a facilitator, you're often standing in that purpose when the group can't do it itself.
Mm.
And it's
Mm. Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
sometimes it's hard, particularly for professors, to let go of their thing. They
Mm.
really, really, really want to say it. And,
They do.
they're
They
probably not
do.
in a lot of situations where they don't get to say their beliefs.
Yeah.
So that may not work in that particular situation, but it could be a way to interrupt the pattern if you're
Yes.
seeing that
Yeah.
emerge.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, sometimes taking people out of their environment. One of the things I really like to do is to take them
Mm.
out of that logical
Mm.
space and to say, well, what does your heart say? Or
Yeah.
what's your intuition
Yeah.
on this? So it takes them out of that
Yeah.
logical, rational data analysis mode.
Mm. Mm.
Because often in academic situations, we're very process
Mm.
and risk averse
Mm.
in our approaches. And
Mm.
sometimes it's a human layer that will create something that's different, a
Yeah.
different knowledge that needed to be present.
Yeah.
Um,
Mm.
yeah, I
Thank
can
you. Kia
imagine you
ora.
can very easily get everyone with a hand up a chance to speak. The meeting would be over 3, 4 hours later.
Yeah.
Basically, yes. and then get nothing done.
Yeah.
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 Is there a place for that though? When you kind of, I remember once a very experienced facilitator said to me when I was complaining that people weren't following my instructions, she said, well, they're the wrong instructions. And I'm like,
Ah.
so sometimes I wonder about this. It's like when you're working for a client, you normally have a purpose that you have to achieve, but sometimes you are asking the wrong questions or you've jumped in a stage in the wrong
Mm.
spot.
Mm.
Yeah.
When I must admit, she was a very, very experienced, did lots of amazing work, it still does. But she did say she often got sacked. She was quite a flexible approach. But I think, is there ever a time to go, you know what? I think we need to do this before we start.
Mm.
Mm. Okay, so we did prepare to go through some of the challenges that you brought, but before we go there, I was thinking I might do a little pitch about Synergy before we go into the last 10 minutes, because we often run out of time. So these are just some courses coming up this year for us. So we got the stage 2, which is all about learning about those distinctions and practicing them and trying different interventions that your mind can do. So getting them more embodied understanding of those distinctions. We still have a couple of spots left in our Sydney course. Even if you haven't done stage 1 and you're experienced facilitator, you're welcome to join us for stage 2. Yeah, just have a chat with us and we can make that happen. There are a couple of online ones, stage 1s coming up. And we got an in-person stage 1 in Auckland coming up. And there's also a link to the book. So I will put those links into the chat now. Then you can grab them. And then when we get deeper into the next discussion and you have to jump off, you can do that. So here's my chat. Yeah. And also, if you just love to have a chat with one of us, I put my calendar link in here as well. You can book a little discovery call with us, and we can just have a chat about any questions you have, what we discussed today, or you want to know more about what we do. So you're welcome to yeah, book that in. And now let's go back to some of the things you brought in to the session today. The first one So this is all summarized of all the different ideas you brought in. So there was a lot around managing diversions and off-track moments. Is there anything that you like to add, or is there anything you already learned from what we already discussed? Like, how do you bring groups back when they are going off track? What what are some ideas that people maybe bring to the table? Let's do a bit of wisdom gathering, and then Stephen and I can share something as well. Any good tips,
Uh,
Letitia? Yeah.
yes, I work mostly in the virtual space, and I found from two recent sessions that purpose and culture needed to be even more clear when it comes to people having voice. So that also it doesn't take us off track from purpose. If everyone's going around giving their 2 cents worth, then we're going to lose our purpose and culture, essentially, in terms of timing around what we're here for. So, creating other virtual spaces where people can also share their opinions and thoughts and then coming back into it at another time. And for me, it was just an electronic form where if things are coming up for you, feel free to enter it into this space and we will revisit it with a Q&A response at the end of the session so as not to then railroad with hands up and lots of interruptions throughout. We also had it as a chat option. If you were okay about not being anonymous, that you can chuck it into the chat. And then I had a co-facilitator who was responding to the chat conversation.
Mm. Yeah, great. I think actually that's one benefit of virtual, right? That we can have several things happening at once. So people could, note things down or put something on a form or put something in the chat whilst the conversation is going on. In an in-person environment, we have something like a parking lot flip chart, in the old days, but it always requires like a conversation. Someone actually brings up the issue, then you say, okay, is that aligned with the purpose, or can we park that on the parking lot? So it's a great idea, and I love, it's just fantastic to see how that really easy works in virtual, and how can we do that in the physical world as well. Thank you for much. It's a great,
I
great
think
idea.
the other thing you touched on was co-facilitating with someone else. It makes such a difference, I think, if you've got someone that you're working with. So I really like teaming up with someone and instead of doing it on my own. So yeah, I think that it's such a wonderful tool.
Yeah.
Yeah. Next.
Yep, Stephen, you want to go?
This one too. The project sponsor, there was at the bottom, including a notable example of a project sponsor taking a workshop off track for an entire hour. I think, oh, the tyranny. Yeah, it's one of those examples of power over, perhaps, where that hierarchical role and that power role can very easily do that. And if the purpose and the culture's really clear, you'd hope that would be a safe container to avoid that kind of pattern of behavior happening. But organizations are hierarchical, and sometimes that hierarchy will come in and control. I'm just sort of
Yeah,
thinking, which intervention would we make around that in terms of our mandala? I'm not really sure. Yes.
Yeah, I often speak with the project sponsors beforehand and ask them what is their role in the event, and really make them aware of the power of their voice, and often ask them either not to be in it or to speak last if they actually want to empower the group. So really managing that. But yeah, in the moment, that's a real tough one. How to
Yeah.
create power with maybe intervene when there's a moment of quietness and like, thank you. Would you, do you want to hear anything from the group as well? In response to what you're saying or something. I was like, maybe use my German
Yeah.
directness in that.
Give them 5 minutes and then intervene. Yeah.
It's tough on. It's a real tough on.
Yeah.
Use the power over. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go for balancing engagement without suppressing voices. This is also quite a difficult one, isn't it? How to make sure people don't feel dismissed Does anyone has an elegant intervention they could share how to do that? Anyone here figured it out? Well, I can share one. I had like work with in the biochemistry industry. Again, they're similar to academics, you know, they know a lot, the doctors or researchers or you know, and they're like a team, and one of them was very dominant in the group, and it was all about team culture development. We were all sitting together, and that one person was just keeping hogging the voice, right, and the air in the room. He was just keeping on sharing his things. And my co-facilitator, that's what I learned from her, she just really energetically went forward and just pointed at him and said, like, thank you, we've heard your perspective. I would love to hear other perspectives in the room. And boom, she just opened that up and put it back, right? She honored his perspective, but was also very clear. She met with her body energy, his energy, of course. You know, she had to actually sort of do a bit of a gesture and go in there to point at him and say, thank you so much. We heard your perspective. We would love to hear other perspectives as well, because we here really want to hear the diversity that's in the room. And he didn't had anything on it because he didn't even notice that he was hogging the space. You know, like it was all fine.
Mm.
But that's the sort of truthfulness and congruence. Sometimes you just have to go in and thanks, you know, say thanks and can we have other voices?
Yeah, I would have probably made a similar suggestion, but sometimes it might be empowering the quiet voices too, and you might actually choose someone in the group and say, "Oh, we haven't heard from you, you know, so and so. Have you got any thoughts on this perspective that you can share?" And sometimes those people that are often more quieter and maybe more introverted, they're often picking up what different people are saying, and they're often able to stitch them together in really beautiful ways that those that are doing all the talking can't. And you know, if the facilitator's not there directing that, then they might be quiet in some of the meetings. I know with the IAF board, when I was on that, our vice chair international would not speak until the chairman opened the floor and invited her to speak. So we could go through a meeting and she would never speak if the chairman had forgot to make a part of the agenda for her. And those cultural differences can sometimes play out in the group. So yeah, I'm often looking at who hasn't spoken and who hasn't spoken recently, and if there is someone that's doing a lot of the talking, it might be, yeah, just pointing out that, you know, we want to hear everybody's voices here, and that's really great. Thank you for that contribution. Um,
Thanks, Dan.
mm,
Yes, we're on
yeah,
time, so please
so
jump off if you need to go. We're happy to stay a little longer and finish this off if you're happy to. So I think Stephen just mentioned a lot of examples on how to re-engage, like being direct and actually listening to who or watching who's not engaged and bringing them in. Holding space versus staying on purpose. Tension between allowing the group to allow genuinely relevant threats. Yeah, I think we mentioned it as well a little bit during today, right? Like how to um, how to balance this. Sometimes you have to let it run, you know, and energetically feel like that's actually something much more important. You can ask